West Africa Democracy Radio. 94.9 FM Dakar.
WADR, promoting dialogue.
It is 6 p.m. in Dakar and Monrovia. Good evening and welcome to Newslink here on West Africa Democracy Radio 94.9 FM and live on all our online platforms. My name is Deborah Amuwo.
And I am Imo Edet.
First, our top stories.
Latest flood outlook reveals that the 3 states in Nigeria are at risk of severe flooding in 2026.
Ghana's President Mahama launches free primary healthcare program to address universal health challenges.
One key aspect of the free primary health care is preventive, to identify the illness and get early treatment before it develops into something else.
Journalists and civil society in the Gambia reject the government's proposed media regulations.
The minister's comments demonstrates that he is unwilling to engage in any progressive discussions on media regulatory system that safeguards press freedom and freedom of expression in the Gambia.
And Pope Leo XIV arrives in Cameroon, marking the second leg of his apostolic journey to Africa. Stay tuned for details of these stories and more.
West Africa Democracy Radio. It's you speaking.
Thank you for joining us. We begin in Nigeria, where the federal government has announced that a significant number of communities across the country are at risk of flooding in 2026. The Minister of Water Resources and Sanitation, Joseph Utsev, made this known during the presentation of the 2026 Annual Flood Outlook in Abuja. According to the report, over 14,000 communities in 266 local government areas across 33 states and the Federal Capital Territory fall within high flood risk zones. Usman Umar gives the details in the following report.
The affected states include Abia, Adamawa, Anambra, Bauchi, Bayelsa, Benue, Borno, Cross River, Delta, Ebonyi, and Edo. Others are Enugu, Gombe, Imo, Jigawa, Kaduna, Kano, Kebbi, Kogi, Kwara, Lagos, and Nasarawa, as well as Niger, Ogun, Ondo, Osun, Oyo, Plateau, Rivers, Sokoto, Taraba, Yobe, Zamfara, and the Federal Capital Territory. The outlook also indicates that 405 local government areas in 35 states fall within moderate flood risk zones, with Ekiti State being the only exception. In addition, minimal flooding is expected in 923 communities across 77 local government areas in 24 states. The minister noted that this year's flood outlook introduces a community-based forecasting system designed to provide more precise, location-specific warnings to enable faster response and intervention. Meanwhile, President Bola Tinubu has reaffirmed the federal government's commitment to strengthening emergency response systems and promoting sustainable development. Represented by the Minister of Environment, Balarabe Lawal, the president said the government is taking steps to improve the capacity and coordination of relevant agencies to ensure timely and effective disaster response. He emphasized the important role of rescue teams in mitigating the impact of emergencies across the country.
Usman Umar filed that report.
In Ghana, President John Mahama says the government free primary healthcare program forms part of broader efforts to achieve universal health coverage. The initiative was officially launched earlier today at the Shai Osudoku District Hospital in the Greater Accra region. Speaking during the ceremony, the president explained that the program is designed to complement existing healthcare interventions and close critical gaps in service delivery. He said although Ghana has made significant strides through the National Health Insurance Scheme's NHRS, many communities and individuals remain inadequately covered.
In Ghana, we introduced the National Health Insurance Scheme, and it expanded coverage and affordability in a major way. But since we introduced the National Health Insurance Scheme, we still have a lot of pockets of underserved areas, especially in the rural areas. And so One key aspect of the free primary health care is preventive, to identify the illness and get early treatment before it develops into something else. And so a major part of the free primary health care is the health screening aspect. And we are encouraging that when we roll out the free primary health care, our traditional leaders and our religious leaders will help us to mobilize their communities. At least every Ghanaian must be screened once a year. And you get the basic screening, and that includes hypertension. So the free primary health care post would have the sphygmanometers so that they can check your blood pressure to see if you are.
Ghana's President John Mahama speaking there at the official launch of the government's free primary health care program.
In Benin, where Romuald Wadani, the winning candidate of the April 12 presidential polls, has called for national unity and dialogue. In his message to the nation on Tuesday, the candidate of the ruling coalition commended the mobilization of the Beninese people and outlined the prospects for a shared future. The president-elect welcomed the results, calling them a victory at the ballot box. Augustine Koli completes the story.
In his statement addressed to the nation, Romuald Wadani called for national unity and continuity of reforms. He said the election was conducted under satisfactory conditions and praised the electoral authorities for enabling citizens to vote freely. The winning candidate also highlighted what he described as a strong voter participation marked by fervor, conviviality, and discipline, while commending all stakeholders involved in the process. Additionally, Wadani acknowledged congratulations from his main opponent, Paul Hunkwe, who reportedly praised his Republican spirit. In his remarks, the presidential coalition candidate said he accepts the early results with humility, describing them as the expression of national mobilization involving voters, political parties, unions, and the diaspora. Romuald Wadani said the outcome reflects a desire for unity in a challenging international context and pledged to take these results into account as he prepares for the responsibilities ahead. According to preliminary results released by the National Autonomous Electoral Commission, SINA, Wadani is currently leading the electoral polls with 94%.
Augustine Colley filed that report.
More stories coming up on West Africa Democracy Radio. Newslink continues.
Now to Côte d'Ivoire, which is at the center of discussions on digital issues across Africa. The 13th edition of the Digital Rights and Inclusion Forum officially opened on Tuesday in the capital, Abidjan. The forum, initiated by the Paradigm Initiative, is being held under the theme Building an Inclusive and Resilient Digital Future. Chris Vaticho tells us more in this report.
Over 3 days, participants will delve deeper into the topic to promote more inclusive and resilient digital ecosystems. The forum also aims to strengthen synergies between stakeholders and propose concrete solutions to persistent challenges. According to Benga Sesa, executive director of the organization, this edition is positioned as a key platform for rethinking digital public policies across the continent.
Number one is if people have a better understanding of what it means to be resilient and what it means to include others in their conversations, then we're glad. Secondly, if people are able to attend sessions to network and be able to work together, we're happy. And at the end of the day, we're launching 2 reports actually and a platform. If people are able to use those platforms and use those reports to improve inclusion, to improve resilience, then we're the happiest organizers of any event.
The program features over 120 interactive sessions, including roundtables and lightning talks, and key themes such as artificial intelligence governance, combating disinformation, and online inclusion. A highlight of this edition is the presentation of the Londa Report, a tool for comparatively assessing the performance of African countries and digital inclusion. DRIF 2026 brings together nearly 1,000 delegates from 50 countries in Africa, Europe, and the Americas. It aims to be an essential platform for global digital dialogue. Its ambition is to make digital technology a lever for equity, development, and resilience for the Africa of tomorrow.
A report there from WDL's Abidjan correspondent Marcel Larison-Blair and presented by Christopher Aticho.
Away from Abidjan, we head to Sierra Leone, where the government is carrying out a nationwide enforcement of mandatory registration requirements for all foreign nationals residing and working in the country. The exercise covers compliance with non-national identity cards, residence permits, and work permits. Authorities say the initiative aims to strengthen national security systems through a comprehensive database of foreign nationals to improve monitoring and regulatory compliance. Sankule Janko reports.
The Sierra Leonean government warns that failure to comply with the mandatory registration requirements for foreign nationals will lead to enforcement actions. Authorities say all applications and renewals for residence and work permits must now be processed through a unified online platform. The system is coordinated by the Office of the National Security, the Ministry of Employment, Labour and Social Security, including the Sierra Leone Immigration Department and the National Civil Registration Authority. According to officials, the move aims to improve security and strengthen regulatory control. However, the rollout is raising concerns within the private sector, where many businesses rely heavily on foreign workers, particularly in mining, construction, retail, hospitality, and technical services. Business owners caution that stricter enforcement could drive up compliance costs, especially for small and medium-sized enterprises employing expatriate staff. There are also concerns about possible delays in permit processing and the administrative burden of frequent renewals. The initiative comes less than 2 months after nearly 1,000 Sierra Leonean nationals were deported from Guinea over illegal residency and related offences.
That was Sankule Janko reporting.
In neighboring Liberia, hundreds of students took to the streets of Monrovia on Tuesday demanding action on youth unemployment and growing injustices affecting young people. The protest, held under the theme March for Jobs and Justice, was organized by the Students' Unification Party and drew participants from universities, including several high schools across the capital. What began as a peaceful demonstration later turned into chaos as officers of the Liberia National Police fired tear gas to disperse the crowd. WDL's Monrovia correspondent Abraham Parker reports.
The protesters say their action is driven by frustration over the government's failure to create meaningful employment opportunities for Liberia's growing youthful population.
We are observed that many of our students, they are being raped on this regime, and that's the reason students are here in making sure that they will petition Mr. Wadr.
The president was brave enough to go to the Sona and tell that he had created 700,000 jobs for the young people, which of what our fathers say. You cannot promise the people that you create jobs, then you come into power now, you can see anything happening.
67% of the population, they don't have access to electricity. While government officials, senators, representatives, directors, and ministers of the United Party their own executive plan.
Despite the initial crackdown, the students later regrouped near the United States Embassy in Monrovia and presented a formal petition outlining their concerns and demands. The group chairman, Odysseus Moba, calls for urgent government intervention to address unemployment and improving living conditions for young Liberians.
The government of the Republic of Liberia, led by Mr. Joseph Yuma Parker, immediately design, publish, and implement a comprehensive, transparent, non-partisan task strategy for meaningfully employing thousands of Liberians with a money salary of at least $500.
Youth unemployment remains a persistent challenge in Liberia as a significant portion of the population is under the age of 35. While the government is yet to officially respond to Tuesday's protest, the demonstration underscores a growing wave of youth dissatisfaction that analysts warn it could intensify if concrete steps are not taken. For Newslink on WADR, Abraham Parker, Monrovia.
Now let's focus on the Gambia, where journalists, civil society groups, and academic stakeholders boycotted a government validation workshop on proposed media regulations. They warned that the measures could threaten press freedom. The session, organized by the Public Utilities Regulatory Authority, aims to review draft rules covering broadcasting online content and the registration of media practitioners. However, critics say proposals to register journalists and social media users with large followings could undermine independent journalism and restrict freedom of expression. From Banjul, Sandonal Mendy reports.
The boycott targets 3 key draft instruments, including the Broadcasting and Online Content Regulations 2026, the Licensing Registration and Authorization Guidelines 2026, and the Journalist Registrations Guidelines 2026. At the center of the dispute is a requirement to register journalists and influential social media users, a move critics say could set a dangerous precedent. During the workshop, Information Minister Ismaila Ceesay was caught on a hot microphone, reacting to the absence of journalists and suggesting he preferred their non-participation. His remarks have drawn public criticism. Modi Diouf, Secretary General of the Gambia Press Union, says the comments raise serious concerns about the government's commitment to engaging the press.
The minister's comments demonstrates that he is unwilling to engage in any progressive discussions on a media regulatory system that safeguards press freedom and freedom of expression in the Gambia.
Meanwhile, human rights activist Madi Jobate also expresses concern about the minister's remarks.
It's rather disappointing and very worrying that the minister could not see things, from a positive point of view, but rather wants to approach things from a very autocratic and a very violent and a very vindictive way.
Similarly, Yusuf Taylor, president of the Gambia Online Media Association, warns against the minister's statement.
Such comments reinforce the perception that the consultation process is merely a procedural formality rather than a genuine effort to engage meaningfully with stakeholders and address legitimate concerns within the media sector.
Reactions from within the media community have been swift, with journalists warning that the registration of practitioners and influencers could affect freedom of expression. For Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio, I am Sangdana Mendy, reporting from Banjul.
You're listening to Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio, 94.9 FM Dakar, and on all of our WADR platforms.
Here's a reminder of our top stories.
Ghana's President Mahama launches free primary health care program to address universal health challenges.
Latest flood outlook reveals 33 states in Nigeria are at risk of severe flooding in 2026.
Journalists and civil society in the Gambia reject government proposed media regulations.
Still ahead in the news, Pope Leo XIV arrives in Cameroon, marking the second leg of his apostolic journey to Africa.
We do have a guest interview and sports news. Please stay with us.
West Africa Democracy Radio. It's you speaking.
Don't forget you can listen to us live on all of our social media platforms. Now, Burkina Faso is increasing its partnership with China. On Tuesday, Foreign Minister Karamoko Jean-Marie Traoré held talks with the Chinese ambassador to Burkina Faso, De Jong Zhao, in Ouagadougou. The meeting focused on strengthening bilateral cooperation between the two countries. Abdullah Hassan completes the story.
During the meeting, officials of Burkina Faso and China reviewed the current state of relations and explored new opportunities to deepen their partnership. They highlighted the importance of increasing exchanges of delegations to better tap into existing opportunities. Discussions also covered several ongoing development projects which were described as generally satisfactory. These initiatives span key sectors including healthcare, agriculture, access to clean drinking water, energy, and human resource training, areas seen as vital to Burkina Faso's socio-economic growth. Minister Traoré welcomed the Chinese ambassador's active involvement in monitoring cooperation efforts and reaffirmed his ministry's commitment to supporting the effective implementation of projects funded by China. The meeting reflects a shared ambition by Ouagadougou and Beijing to take their cooperation to the next level for the mutual benefit of both nations.
Abdullah Hassan filed a report.
Away from the sub-region, Pope Leo XIV has arrived in Cameroon, marking the second leg of his apostolic journey to Africa. The pontiff touched down at Yaoundé Simalène International Airport earlier today, April 15, 2026. Upon arrival, the Pope was received by Cameroon's Prime Minister Joseph Dion Ngouté. The welcome ceremony featured the playing of national anthems and the presentation of official delegations from both the Vatican and Cameroon. His visit to the country follows an earlier stop in Algeria, where he began his African tour on Monday. Pope Leo XIV is expected to remain in Cameroon until Saturday, April 18, before continuing his journey to Angola and Equatorial Guinea. He's scheduled to return to Rome on April 23rd.
Politics, analysis on major news, social matters, and all. This is A Guest.
Well, our guest this evening is Modou Diouf, Secretary General of the Gambia Press Union. He joins us with the reasons why media stakeholders and civil society are rejecting the government's proposed media regulations. Their rejection of the proposed law was observed on Tuesday when journalists and other stakeholders boycotted a session organized by the Public Utilities Regulatory Authority to review draft rules covering broadcasting, online content, and the registration of media practitioners. Take a listen.
The government is trying to come up with new regulations for the media, one of which is a broadcasting and online content regulation, but also another is to get independent journalists or individual journalists registered with the government regulator, which is the Public Utilities Regulatory Authority, and also to get online media platforms to be licensed by the Public Utilities Regulatory Authority. We've looked at this at the level of the Gambia Press Union, and we've met with various stakeholders, including journalist organizations, the Newspaper Publishers Association, Broadcasters Association, and a whole lot of journalist associations, including Women Journalists and Young Journalists Association in the Gambia, as well as some civil society actors and organizations. We've looked at the proposed regulations, and we feel that it will affect press freedom and freedom of expression because it ultimately gives powers to a state-controlled regulator to decide issues of accreditation. It also has powers to decide to revoke people's licenses, individual journalist registration or accreditation licenses, and also those of the online media platforms. We see these things as not in line with international freedom of expression standards. But the government refused to listen to us. When we raised these concerns, we put it in a position paper that was submitted to the minister and also to the Public Utilities Regulatory Authority.
Is the government proposing to holistically decide when and how journalists, broadcasters, or online content creators should publish their information? Or is it just about being registered with the government so that they are identified as legitimate journalists, broadcasters, or online content creators?
So the proposal actually is not just about registering journalists or online content creators for the purpose of identification. The regulations give powers to the government regulator to also censor content online. They can recommend for removal of content. They can also provide sanctions for journalists or content regulators who are seen to have posted something that they do not agree with, some things that are critical with the government or against the government. So these are also our concerns because the regulations also tend to limit certain issues that we journalistically are accepted, in terms of practice. Because it's saying in one of the regulations, it prohibits secret recording, for example. And we all know in investigative journalism, at some point, it's not always the case, but investigative journalists working on certain stories at some point need to go undercover, record or film people secretly, So the content regulation is restricting that, which will also affect accountability journalism, issues of exposing corruptions, and issues of misgovernance and those kind of stuff.
How would you also term the government's justification that this validation is necessary, or this proposed regulation is necessary to curtail the issue of fake news and also ensure responsible journalism in the Gambia?
Yeah, also for that, we do not agree with that because you don't bring regulations like this to decide who practices and who does not practice as a journalist in order to contain fake news, or misinformation and disinformation. As far as the fight against disinformation is concerned, what we think is best
is to provide training for journalists to be able to identify misinformation and disinformation, and to be able to tackle it in their reporting.
What would the press union do, including journalists and online media or online content creators, if the government approves this regulation following the validation exercise?
Well, if the government approves the regulations after the validation, what we have said in our resolution that was signed and endorsed by media organizations and civil society is that we would not cooperate. That we advise journalists not to go and register with PORA and, give them a mandate, the opportunity to be able to restrict their right to practice journalism.
Modou Diouf is the Secretary General of the Gambia Press Union.
In our sports stories, we begin with cycling, as the first edition of the Women's Tour of FASO began on Tuesday, April 14, 2026. It'll consist of 5 stages with a route connecting several towns across the country to highlight the region's diversity and foster community engagement. This international competition will feature the participation of countries such as Benin, Burundi, Cameroon, Cote d'Ivoire, Kenya, Mali, Namibia, and Niger. The tour will conclude on April 19th, 2026, with a closed-circuit race in Ouagadougou.
Meanwhile, in tennis, the International Tennis Federation has organized a training camp in the Czech Republic for young African players as part of preparations for the Dakar 2026 Youth Olympic Games. 7 players from Uganda and Tunisia took part in the 2-week camp, where they trained alongside members of the Czech national team and also competed in junior tournament. The initiative aims to develop the next generation of talent, with both players and coaches benefiting from high-level training. Notably, Ugandan players Joseph Seba Tindira and Patience Anyango won medals during the camp competitions. The Dakar 2026 Youth Olympic Games, set to be the first held in Africa, will run from October 31 to November 13 across Dakar, Diamniadio and Saly in Senegal.
And in football, Atletico Madrid have booked their place in the UEFA Champions League semi-finals after eliminating FC Barcelona with a 3-2 aggregate victory, despite losing 2-1 in the second leg. Barcelona made a flying start with Lamine Yamal and Ferran Torres scoring early to spark hopes of a comeback, but Ademola Lookman struck for Atletico, restoring their aggregate advantage in a tense and hard-fought encounter. The game turned further against Barcelona when Eric Garcia was sent off, reducing the visitors to 10 men and ending their chances of forcing extra time. Managed by Diego Simeone, Atletico reached the semi-finals for the first time since 2017 and will now face either Arsenal or Sporting CP.
And we've come to the end of this edition of Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting from Dakar, Senegal. Thank you for listening, and many thanks to Mustafa Sek and Modou Diouf for the technical support.
Do interact with us via social media platforms X, Instagram, and Facebook at WADR English. Coming up next is 50/50, our gender program here on 94.9 FM. My name is Deborah Amuwo.
And I am Imo Edet. Good evening.
Good evening.
And many thanks to you for listening to Newslink via Hot 104.3 FM,
Hilltop Radio 104.7 FM,
and Veritas Radio 102.9 in Banjul, the Gambia. We also appreciate our listeners in Liberia via Alternative Youth Radio 98.9 FM, Lofa County,
Radio Kagama 94.5 FM, Nibe County, DCN Radio 91.3 FM, Riverside County, Radio Gulf FM 91.3 Sierra Leone in Nigeria, and Love 104.5 FM Abuja.
For you listening via Radio Pad 95.1 Damango, Savannah region, and on Royals FM 104.7 Wenchi, Ghana, we say a big thank you.